bugs. We got bugs. There's like a trillion cicadas all around me making a racket. I have no control over that. But there are some bugs I do have control over. You know, I swear to God, I just came up with that off the top of my head. I deserve some kind of award. But there are bugs that I do have some control over, and they're here on our charger. And this is a video that I know that anybody out there who's dealing with any Carter carburetor, right? So whether it's an AFB, an AVS, or any of the Edelbrocks, because they're all internally exactly the same. They all use the same exact systems, as well as like BBDs, BBSs. It's just a Carter carburetor thing. I know that if you've got one of these carburetors and you have an oddball tuning issue with it, you will find this useful. Now, I've done plenty of Edelbrock carburetor videos in the past, so I don't want to keep going over the same things over and over again, but I know that I've never covered this before because it's a problem that only occurs every once in a while. So we've broken our charger out of hibernation. She's been sitting in the driveway since August of last year when we cruised around Nashville with it as we finished painting it, and it hasn't been touched. I took the battery out of it and it just sat in the driveway. So yesterday I said, well, let's just get this thing up to the shop and start going over it so we're ready for power tour, no issues, no hidden things. So the first issue that I came across, and again, see, this is something that a lot of you guys may come across. It's unrelated to specifically the Edelbrock carburetor, but I got to show you this anyway. Okay, so we got the motor started. She fired right up. Just poured a little gas down the carb. She fired right up. And the first thing that happened was, and this is a common, anytime a car sits for any amount of time, it's a very common thing. Started leaking from the fuel filter, right? So now, normally what happens is, as the car sits, the rubber contracts a little bit. You know, the rubber connections from the steel line to the fuel filter contracts a little bit, and the clamp doesn't grab it as hard as it should. So typically, like 999 times out of 1,000, you grab a screwdriver and you just cinch down on the clamps, right? Just give them like a half a turn, and that's all it takes, and then the leak is fixed. I thought it was. So I started the car up, and I noticed the fuel dripping from it. I let it run for a minute. I shut it off, and then I grabbed the screwdriver and cinched them down, figuring, okay, well, that's all there's going to be to it. It wasn't. I drove it from the shop, from the house to here at the shop, I don't know, about 12 miles. And I got here and I'm smelling gas. I popped the hood and there's still fuel leak in there. I'm like, maybe the rubber line is shot. But when I looked carefully, what it actually was is the crimp between this part of the filter and the plastic must have loosened up because it was actually leaking from the crimp itself, which is something I've never seen before. Now, okay, before I already see a lot of you guys in the comments, why would you use a cheap generic plastic filter like that? I only use OEM metal. Your mommy raised a real champion. But me, like hundreds of millions of other people and hundreds of millions of cars for the last 60 or 70 years, have been using these things completely without worry or trouble or issue, right? It's just a standard plastic, clear plastic fuel filter. I bought this from, it was either O'Reilly's or Advanced, I don't remember. But I put this on the engine when I first drove it from the house to the old shop, I guess about 1.5 years ago or thereabouts. So that's how long it had been on there. And it definitely wasn't leaking when I parked the car. So something happened during the course of the time that it's sitting, and that crimp failed in some way or another. I don't see any cracks in the plastic. There's no obvious, issues with it. It just let go. This is something to be aware of. Like, every once in a while, give it a check. Like I said, this was bought when I bought a bunch of other stuff, spark plugs and belts and so on and so forth. And I got a new fuel filter while I was at it. So that's the one that came, and yeah. So keep an eye on that. Definitely something you want to check. All right, so the bug I had that's, like I said, this is universal to all of these Carter carburetors. Now, I know I'm a bad YouTuber. I should have done all of this, showing you what was happening and then the repair as I was doing it and then fixing it, but I didn't. because I didn't intend on making a video on this. I just, well, it was typical stuff, and I've already covered these problems before. It was only afterwards, and I says, wait, I never covered this specific problem. So I'm going to show you what I went through on a stunt carburetor. All right. So as I've explained in a bunch of videos in the past, the Carter carburetors, and that includes the Edelbrocks, because the Edelbrock is just a copy of the Carter AFB and the AVS also. All of the idle and low speed circuitry passes through the booster body, okay? Now, a very common problem, especially when a car's been sitting for an extended period of time, or you buy an unknown carburetor, you put it on your engine, and it just doesn't run right, you can't get a idle, you get no response out of the adjustment screws. The common problem is this. You take the top of the carburetor off, you remove these two screws from here and here, and you lift this booster body out, and lo and behold, you'll find those passages right there clogged, okay? So what you do is, you take a piece of, you could use a bread wrapper, you could use stainless wire, you could use guitar string, there's so many different things you can use. But you pass the wire through these holes, through these passages, and you unblock them. Because the way these carburetors work is that here's your idle screw, okay? And here's your idle, well, geez. Here's your idle passage, okay? Can you see that? I don't know if you can see that. I'm a bad YouTuber. I know. So the way these carburetors work is that the fuel goes from the bowl, this extra cruddy bowl, goes from the bowl through this, up through this, and then back down to where you're adjusting it with this screw, okay? And the reason for that is because if the fuel didn't come above, if that circuitry, the fuel in that circuit didn't come above the level of fuel in the float bowl, it would just siphon the float bowl out. So it goes from the low point here, up through this booster body and those passages, okay? And then back down and there. So when you get these things where you've got no adjustment from these screws, either one or both, this is where you're going to find your problem. And we've done that video a couple of times. But this time was a little bit different with this. So here's what I had. I started the engine. Now there was no choke involved, so keep that in mind. It really doesn't need a choke. Gave it a squirt of gas, spun it 2-3 times, she lit right off. And then it pumped the gasoline up. Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. I filled the float bowl with gasoline first. Then gave it a squirt, started it, she started right up, pumped the fuel up, and all was well as far as she was running goes. After it warmed up, after she had been running for, let's say, 10-15 minutes like that, when I would come to a stop, it was only wanting to idle on like 4 cylinders. It was like wanting to drop. Like, that's weird. Maybe it must have sucked something into one of those tiny passages I just showed you. Shut the car off. Just took a quick look around, make sure it wasn't dumping gas or anything like that. Fired it back up and it was fine. Drove it another 10-15 minutes and it did the same thing when it came to a stop. It just didn't want to idle. It was just like starving for gas. And it wasn't dripping fuel, it wasn't overflowing the carburetor, right? So this is a problem I've come across, I'm gonna say maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 50 years that I've been messing around with Carter Edelbrock carburetors. These screws, these 2 screws, these right here, loosened up. They loosened up. Now, I don't know why it happened in this case. Now, that carburetor has never been opened up. I've had that carburetor for probably about 15 years. It's bounced from a bunch of different engines, and it's never given me a lick of trouble, and I've never opened it for any reason. It's just a good, reliable carburetor. But out of the blue, after she sat for that period of time, out in the winter, we had a really severe cold snap, and this car was sitting outside during it. Something happened, something caused that relationship between the booster body and the main body of the carburetor to like expand and then like recontract, and it stretched the screws or stretched the threads, however it was, just enough so that they got loose. And when they got loose, instead of pulling fuel from the bowl the way it's supposed to, it was just sucking air through this passage. Now when I shut it off, I guess it just settled back out, or maybe gasoline dripped into it and made that section wet again, the gasket wet again, and so it would seal temporarily. But after it was driven for just a few minutes, boom, did the same thing. So in this case, there was no blockage at all in the idle circuitry in the booster body. Instead, those two screws had just loosened themselves up. So the solution to that, when you come across a problem, these carburetors are so ridiculously easy to work on. Anybody, like if you have even just the slightest bit of mechanical inclination, you can work on these carburetors. And we've done, like I said, in the past, just search Edelbrock Carburetor on this channel and you'll see that I've already done like probably 24 different Edelbrock carburetor, and I say Edelbrock, but this includes Carter AFBs and AVSs, as well as BBDs and BBSs, because they're always the same basic circuitry. It's a trademark of the Carter and then later Edelbrock carburetors. The thermoquad is an exception, but then again, the thermoquad is an exception to everything. So, already done these videos. But I just wanted to make you aware of something that can happen with these things that will drive you absolutely crazy, you know, if you don't know where to look. All I did here was tighten the two screws and the problem went away. I've probably put another 20 miles on it since then and she's fine. I know the right thing to do would have been to just pop another gasket in there, but I didn't have one handy and I didn't, and it's fine, and I'll never have another problem with it. And like I said, I have come across this in the past a few times over the course of the decades, and that fixed it. We probably won't ever have another problem with it. I did check the ones on the other side to see if they had loosened up also, and they weren't. They were still tight and snug. So what caused it, I don't know, but that's what it was. So that's it for the Charger. There's nothing else I can really do to it. It's ready for the road now. It was ready for the road back in August when we finished it up. So I'm just going to drive it around a little bit and, I don't know, do some hooning with it perhaps. I don't know, right? I got to get you guys' opinion on something, okay, before I go. So I'm playing with the Belvedere, right? I'm just working through, and there's so many little things that need to be done on this car. And I had picked up last year. I got a deal on some BART wheels, like circle track wheels, and I couldn't pass it up. It was like $50 for all four of them, right? So I bought them and I stuck them on the side, and I've had them hanging around ever since. So I mounted some tires on it, and the car, I've had them on the back of this. Well, just playing around, last night. Tell me what you guys think of this. I know, right? What do you guys? So remember, this is going to be a test mule to test all different stuff on. And right now, it's just the propane engine is just what we're going to play with now. But again, this car is to test all different concepts and ideas, all different fuels, and so on and so forth. What do you guys think of doing this car in like a 1960s NASCAR, like maybe even short track style? You know, a little bit of a rake, you know, and the fat meats all the way around. I put the wheels on it, right? I put the wheels on it, and I'm like, oh God, that's so bad, right? That's badass. And I said, well, you know what I gotta do? I gotta knock all the glass out of this car, and I gotta put one of them. I gotta put a 2-door roof on it, make a 2-door conversion, weld everything closed, and do like a total 60s NASCAR thing. But I think that might be a step too far. But what do you guys think? We set this thing up like an old school NASCAR short track car? Let me know what you think in the comments. I think I have too much time on my hands, right? I hope you got something out of that. I'll see you tomorrow.